Okay, good evening. We're going to go ahead and start the workshop. If you could all have a seat, thank you. This is not a formal meeting, so that we can call to order. We're not going to redo the pledge. We've already kind of done steps 1 through 3. So we're going to move right into, if there's no objection, into public comments. So any public comments regarding priorities, please? Thank you.
Yes, I just would, Dan Keys, Parks and Parkways Board Chairman, just want to remind you all that we have made a recommendation regarding some inclusions in the budget next year. They were for 15. I'm going to give you the numbers we gave. We think that they would permit us to do considerable amount of work that could be accomplished during the course of 1 year. But we said $15,000 for tree planting. It's quite a few empty spaces that need to be filled in. Whatever amount is necessary to complete the installation of the 4 remaining entrance signs, including landscaping and whatever lighting and other things that are associated with them. The normal allocation for continued maintenance of the athletic field at the recreation center. We put a number of $20,000 there, but certainly that's up to whatever our contract is and would be in the year to come. $15,000 for general tree trimming. Again, this can be accomplished in various ways, but that's a number that would give us the ability to get something done in the course of a year. We really think that the village needs to put their minds to the removal of our Australian pines as a goal, and that $30,000 might be a reasonable number for the first year of that. Certainly, if you lengthen it, you shorten it, you need more or less money for that project. But I think we had some good examples of what happens in a hurricane with those trees, and there are others in that condition, and the village has been put on notice regarding that. So it needs to think about it. And lastly, and I'll opine that it's probably one of the more important things is that we believe the community needs a highly qualified public works manager to take some of the burden of the village manager off his shoulders. I think that some of the reasons, some of the things on this list are not getting done is because there simply isn't enough time for the manager to do those project management and development activities. The village signs, for instance. Okay, this is something, we have the signs, we have the money, but that's quite an involved project, and it goes on, and we had a lot of discussion about this. We have many years of living in the village and interacting with the village as board members. The specific board members are there now, and we have just watched and have determined that we need somebody in that position, and there's just too many things that need to happen in this community that need somebody who's capable and has the time to do those things. So I won't belabor it. I talked to 4 of you, and
Thank you very much.
all right, thanks.
Appreciate it. Any other public comments?
Bob Anderson, 119th Street and 11th Place. When you were talking about the sidewalks, years ago, the reason FDOT wanted to put them in, and it was determined, you're correct, that there is not enough room unless they put curbing in, and FDOT didn't want to spend that extra money. So the sidewalks can be put in per the FDOT at that time, as long as you have sidewalks to the, because then the sidewalk can be close to this pavement area. Without the sidewalk, it's got to be farther back. Also, too, I was wondering during the workshop, since it's sort of interactive, can the public, like they had been before, go ahead and be speaking to the commission from time to time during the workshop, not try to figure out ahead of time, like right now, what's going to be discussed. Also, too, what I noticed online, under the, on the special commission meeting, 10A was not in the agenda package online. 10B's resolution was not in the agenda package online. Also, too, during this workshop, agenda item 8 and agenda item 10 is not on the online agenda package. And I was just wondering, well, why weren't those on there? Thank you.
Thank you.
Barbara Kuehl, 111th Street. I was going to address what Bob mentioned also. When I went to the agenda, you were supposed to have backup that were supposed to talk about your goals, suggested goals, and yet there was no information. So as a resident, I have no idea what you're going to talk about. Maybe all of the things I wanted you to address are going to be addressed. But the thing is, they're not. They're not there. And the communication isn't there for residents. One of the biggest things, the biggest problems, you've heard me talk privately and publicly about this, is addressing our roads. Maybe that's something that you're going to be talking about. But I know you went for a grant. A grant isn't the only option. We have to start realizing that we may never get a grant. We have to start doing something for ourselves, and we need to start a plan. We used to do road work every year, even if it was a small project. We haven't done anything, and nobody talks about it. Dan talked about the medians. Maintaining and improving our medians is one of the biggest things, and the commission needs to set a priority to invest in our medians. I'm not going to go into all the different reasons. I've talked to you all privately, and I've also had you support privately, but when it comes to a commission meeting, it never comes up. You need to, it's one of the biggest assets in this village. Besides the medians, you could also be planting on the streets that don't have medians to give them the advantage, so this village is even more walkable. Addressing code violations. Again, you've heard me say this a million times, and I'm not going to tell you that you should be supporting this because you took an oath to support our codes, to have them enforced. What you need to do is ask why they're not being enforced. I'd like you to address the code violations that the city has around our rec center. You have broken sidewalks for years. This is the second time they've been marked and not fixed. Rotting fascia, the swale area around the rec center is mostly dirt. Dan mentioned this too. Finish installing the 4 signs that were done 3 years ago. The rest of this village deserves that. And your job is to find out why these things aren't being done. And it should be done at a commission level, not privately, because there's no way to, you're not allowed to talk privately. So if it's not happening up here, as far as I'm concerned, you're just directing employees by yourself. The other thing is all of your campaign promises were to have more communication to residents. We were going to get the code violations out so that residents would know parking on the lawn isn't allowed, all the different things that we always said, well, people don't know about it. So it's 2 years later, they still don't know about it. They need a mailing to every address, not an e-blast. Every house deserves, spend the money to send everybody code violations, tell them about looking at their own properties and doing improvements, that this helps everybody. Tell them about the visibility triangles that they're supposed to be aware of if they live on a corner or even for their driveways. And educate the community and start doing what you said you were going to do 2 years ago. And that and again, you might be talking about all of these things, and great, but this is a perfect example of not communicating with the village, not having the proper information on your on the calendar. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara.
Dan Schneiger, 11705 Northeast 11th Place. I would like to agree with everything that Barbara just said. The fact that we have 2 full-time code officers and Biscayne Park looks the way that it does is completely unacceptable. You guys took an oath to enforce the standards of Biscayne Park, and you are derelict in your duties. I have sent countless emails to Tracy and to Christian. I can't get a response to save my life. I'm someone who volunteers their time, gives money to projects in the village. I'm on a board, I come here, and I try and do the right thing. And I can't even get an acknowledgement when I send something in to say that my neighbor's lawn hasn't been cut in 3 months. I can't even get acknowledgement. It's unacceptable. And she's right. You guys have been saying for 2 years all about communication. It's a bunch of BS. You guys have given up. And from the looks of things in this audience, so have a lot of other people. I'm surprised to even see, Barbara, absolutely no disrespect to anyone sitting here, but you guys have all been coming here saying the exact same things for how long? Your performance as a commission manager is utterly unacceptable. Unacceptable. So I would love to get a response to some of those emails. It's probably never going to happen because there clearly is no leadership or accountability in Biscayne Park. That's all I can see. We have nodding heads from the people who've lived here for 25 years. How long? 40. Thanks. I've lived here for 2 years, and I can't believe what a shit show this place is. It's sad and ridiculous. And that's all I have to say. I'm done with this place. You guys have botched it. You had a fresh start 2 years ago, all about how great everything was going to be. Christian was crowing about this great new driveway ordinance. What driveway ordinance? We have no enforcement. We have no driveway ordinance. The person who I was told is working on the driveway ordinance comes to our P&Z meetings and takes notes because she says it's a lot more interesting than working on the driveway ordinance. Yeah, she said taking notes at the P&Z meeting is more interesting than working on the driveway ordinance. So that's where we're at. Does anyone have anything to say about any of this? I would just like to say Rox is the one person on this board who responds to my emails and has proactive suggestions and takes action. The only one. So I'm not going to waste any more of my time. Goodbye, everyone. Enjoy this long and what I have no doubt will be a meeting that will accomplish nothing. Good night.
Hello again. David Raymond, 11520 Northeast 9th Avenue. I'm going to agree with a lot of what was said, not by Dan, but by other speakers tonight. And I think that part of the priorities, I guess, for me is there's a lot of things that we've said we're going to do here over the last, we've only been here 3 years. And what I'm going to talk about tonight, I think I've talked about since I've been here as well. And I think part of the reason the audience is just the walking wounded here, the few of us that are left that still have something to say, is I think people get frustrated with not having things done that were supposed to be done or were promised to be done, and they do give up, and it's not a good feeling. And I still love living here. Our kids have a contract on a house here, our son and his wife. I mean, it's a great neighborhood. We're very happy. You'll have 4 more voters, so keep that in mind. 4 more taxpayers, but and another dog. And but I do think it's frustrating to come here time and time again and not get stuff done and see stuff. And I know there's other things to be done, but the stuff that has to be done isn't getting there. So with that, few things. So street flooding. The village spent a lot of money. I know it wasn't our money, but it was public money on a whole study about street flooding. Legislative requests have gone in. The picture of the street for our house, to remind everyone, is usually on the cover, and that I've been trying to address since the time we've lived here. We've gotten the drain cleared a few times, and only because I fetch about it enough to get it cleared out. We're still waiting. Last year's budget process, we were supposed to have some quotes on some more permanent fix, whether it be gravel or a catchment basin or something for that street. Literally, people walk through my lawn every day when it rains. Little kids on bikes, baby strollers, everybody comes up through the driveway because the street is impassable. Even when the drains are cleared, it only takes a week or so. The leaf cover across the street on the other well is plugged up again 2 weeks later because it's not maintained. So I'm going to agree with the comment that Dan made about Public Works, and I know years ago, I think that was your job when I first moved here, Christian, and I think we do need a Public Works manager at that level to address a lot of these things. The streets, which I know we put in requests for, there's lots of areas where there's potholes and the streets are falling apart, and since we don't have sidewalks, we're all walking there. People could trip. You're trying to get out of the way of the cars, and streets, some of the sides are crumbled off, and so you wind up in the medians. I know I'm telling you stuff that you already know. Beautification, I'm glad I hear there's requests in for plants and trees and things. A lot of complaints that people have about parking on the medians is because the medians, some of them look like you can park there and you could do whatever you want there because they're not very pretty. If you look at the one over here that everybody did as a community effort, it's beautiful. I don't think anybody's going to drive through there because it looks like something. So that would be nice to be able to do those kinds of things. Public safety, I'm sure that's going to be a priority. I hope that there'll be some training issues that are addressed. I know the chief has spoken about that, but I do hope that would be addressed. And communication, I think we've been taught to agree with other people. That never reset, by the way, Tracy. I see you looking at that, but never reset.
I was wondering,
So,
it didn't seem
yeah,
like it had been reset.
it wasn't
Okay.
3 minutes.
My apologies. Go
Trying
ahead,
to talk
please.
fast.
No,
Communication
finish
and
up. Go ahead.
the newsletter, we had promised to have newsletters, I don't know for how long. It would be wonderful if we had a newsletter, and if we budgeted for that, even if you need to bring in expertise to help write it, if you're setting priorities, hire somebody to write the newsletter. I know you can't do everything, Christian. I know, I understand that, but maybe we need some help to do that, to communicate with the public. And finally, just to get back to you on the last commission meeting, very briefly on the cat issue and the TNR, I have a meeting scheduled with Animal Services this week. They are going to try to arrange for the mobile van, as Commissioner Ross requested, to come out here for the residents. They can't do that. They want to bring a mobile spay and neuter clinic out, as they've done before. Commissioner Ross raised that request. They can do that, but they can't do that for the feral cats, the community cats. It's too much to coordinate. But they can do a trapping separately for the community, and feral cats. So we're working on both. I've been looping Christian into that. We have a call on Thursday, and I'll get back with everybody on the progress.
Thank you for your effort
Thank
on
you.
that so much, David.
Janie Anderson, 11th Place and 119th Street. How I would love to stand here tonight and advocate for new amenities and any number of wonderful projects for this city, but I can't do it, because what I do instead is share the frustration and support totally the comments that you've heard tonight. We've shown, unfortunately, a gross inability to take care of what we already have. Our medians, our roads, these are not things that just happened, but these are things we continue to ignore, or we don't have the right people in place to take care of. We've got a rec center that has been in need of refurbishment for how long now? And now add to the eyesore of the mural. Have you guys seen the mural? I mean, that was an amenity that 2 commissions ago insisted we needed, but again, something we don't seem to be able to take care of. How long do we keep an additional eyesore while we're waiting for a response from the artist or another artist who can help us? At some point, you got to go, oh, well, let's call it an expensive mistake and paint over it. But guys, what you've heard tonight, that's a frustration that's growing because we're not getting the sense that anybody sitting up on this dais is grasping the frustration. For so long, I was so excited we got an additional code officer. Yes, I understand she's only part-time. But also, what people are forgetting, we have 3 additional staff members that were trained in code. That would be the manager, 1 member of the police department, 1 member of Public Works. Yet we are seeing no appreciable improvement. Now, we don't know yet what the final total is. Am I correct for Irma cleanup? But it could be between 150 and 250 on our nickel. No response. And we don't know what homestead increase is going to cost us. So we have got to do everything possible to clean up our own act, to get this city visually better, to get the homes visually better, because a few extra dollars on the trash and garbage bill is not going to save us. But we need a commitment. We need this commission solidly behind a commitment that we take care of what we've got, we fix what we've got, and we start holding this community and its residents to much higher standards than we've done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Gary Kuehl, 777 Northeast 111th Street. Before I forget, David, I think you look at that dip in the road as a liability. It's really an asset. You can advertise your house as waterfront property. You know, I walk the roads. Barbara and I make about a 2.5 mile loop through the village. Same route all the time. And I look at the roads, and they're crumbling. They're falling apart. And the longer you ignore that, the longer you wait, the more expensive it's going to be, because you're losing your bed. The asphalt is literally peeling away from the roads. I don't think there's a road out there that doesn't have major cracking in it. I think you have maybe 400,000 in CITT money just sitting there doing nothing. You don't need to spend $150,000 for an engineering study. It is something that you could, matter of fact, North Miami just did a bunch of work. They may even have a unit price for road work. I don't know if that question's been asked, piggybacking on another municipality. But you need to start something. The other thing is, since we're having kind of a general discussion, last year there was a lot of confusion. There was poor communications. We didn't have a permit for our dumping site during the hurricane. We didn't know what the procedures were for maintenance. And we ran the risk of losing our funding had FEMA decided that we dumped on an unpermitted site. What's our plan? What is our plan for this year? Aren't we a little late in the season to be thinking about it? I haven't seen anything. Maybe I'm just ignorant. But we need to have a permit. We need to have a process. We need to have communications. I don't think we need to go through that again. And my concern is that we'll lose the funding if this isn't handled properly. We stubbed our toe last year. We can't do it twice. Lastly, as you know, I'm chair of the Code Compliance Board. And I reiterate the frustration that we have. To have 4.5 people who are certified, maybe some certifications haven't been maintained, but were trained, and to go downhill in code compliance is pathetic. Now, I hear Commissioner Ross mention property values a couple of times as it applies to the ad valorem taxes. Well, believe me, code compliance has a infinitely more impact on property values. I mean, you have little pigsties out there for months. I put together something at the mayor's request, which I'd be happy to forward to you. Went through the village, picked out some of the recurrent people, recurrent non-compliant people, some of the worst properties outside of one that you all know. And out of, I didn't count them, but of the pages of things that I did, one house was going to be renovated. Another house put up a fence, which they needed, but never cleaned up their yard. And the third house was an illegal driveway that did actually have a prior violation notice. Outside of that, none of the other houses were addressed. I mean, you literally have a house in this community with broken windows, ruts through the front lawn, logs laying in the front lawn, a broken fence, a derelict car. Nothing's done. And when I hear the mayor say, if somebody has multiple violations, don't give them multiple violations, just give them 1 or 2. What kind of logic is that? Those are the houses that you really should focus on. Those are the ones that bring down the overall community. And again, we say it over and over again. We never hear a word about code compliance from you. Nothing. There's no emphasis. There's no discussion. There's no concern. In fact, for 2 years, what have you done? What have you accomplished? You're the most unaccomplished commission we've ever had. You haven't even done anything bad. You haven't done anything. Anyway, enough said. Before I get too wound up.
Any further public comments? Okay. Close for public comments. Let's open for discussion on the fiscal goals and priorities. I'm going to start with the manager.
Thank you, Mayor. Last year, the commission met with us all, and we went through an exercise to determine what was the commission priorities. I think first and foremost on pretty much everyone's mind was roads. That continues to be a priority. As you know, we were very close to getting our grant this year. That unfortunately was killed at the governor's behest.
Governor's law.
And so that one we'll be trying for again. And some of the ones that we have moved forward on, we are moving forward on the merchant services, the credit cards. We are moving forward on the master permitting, the inspection upgrade with our new Calvin Giordano. We've added the additional code officer, Christina Caserta, as a part-time officer. Will we bring her on full-time, hopefully, in September? We'll be talking about that on budget, because I would like to bring her on full-time, and she has expressed interest. Resident communication, we're working on that still. We do have the newsletter. So far, one commissioner's presented her section of it. We need to get the rest of the written portions from the commissioners. And so we would like to get that within the next week if possible. And so we'll go from there. Let's see. For the rec center, we're starting to add more diversified programs there. On the August 7th agenda, we'll see some tennis lessons being added to it. We've added Zumba. We've added a couple other courses this year as well. And, to encourage more age groups and that sort of thing. And there was mention also of the rec center, the damage around the eaves of the rec center. That is being estimated now. We've got 2 estimates. We're waiting on the 3rd to come in, and that will hopefully be done this year under this budget. We do have the money for that. After that, we'd like to repaint and so forth. So that is forthcoming. We'll be adding police events as well, and our new police chief is working to get 2 officers that are reserve officers to be working with some of the kids over at the rec center. So that's something else that we'll be adding. Of course, painting the rec center, that's going to be coming up. Cleaning the medians, that is coming. That is happening now. It's not happening as fast as everyone would like, but it is happening. As far as personnel, we are pretty much fully staffed right now. I would like to add an admin person this year, bring Christina on full-time, and possibly either Public Works or some administrative help for myself, just to keep me from becoming a bottleneck. And then, let's see what else. We'd like to see, last year it was a full commission agreement that we'd like to see the unrestricted fund balance increase, our reserves increase. Our reserves took a hit this year from FEMA. We're waiting to hear back on exactly what we're getting back from FEMA. We have, so far, they have approved one $5,000 project, which is a drop in a big bucket. We're waiting to hear on the other 4 projects yet. They're still reviewing those.
Do you have a timeline on that, out of curiosity?
I'm sorry?
Has any other city been?
No other cities have been
So we're in the boat with everybody else. Okay,
So,
thank you.
On our accounting policies, we've updated that. We've outsourced to GMS, who are doing a fine job. We've knocked out the 2015, the 2016 audits. We're working currently on 2017. So that's 3 major audits in 1 year, as well as the CITT audit, the FRS audit, the FMIT audit, the FDLE audit. So we've sort of been hit with, from all angles with audits this year.
Property too.
But we're getting through them. And so that's moving ahead. And then one of the concerns last year was also speeding and traffic control. I think the Chief Walschlager and then now Chief Cabrera have done a very good job on decreasing that. Chief Cabrera has set up his community policing, so there's more visibility of officers, more supervision of officers as well. And so that will continue to hopefully reduce the speeding in the village.
More training as well, correct?
And so, beg your pardon?
More training as well?
And more training, yes. And so, let's see, police presence, code enforcement, as I said, I know it's not enough for everyone or happening as quick enough for everyone, but that has been cleaning or has been cleaned up on the inside first. Like with many things that we encountered this year, the system itself was broken on the internal aspects of it in Village Hall. So a lot of stuff was begun, never followed up on. This goes back prior to our two current code officers. We've been cleaning up years of neglect on that, getting that to a level point. We're there now, and we are moving forward. And so I think next year you'll be seeing a lot more production on that front. I've made Christina the code supervisor so that Elizabeth has direct supervision all the time now. She's not waiting for me to come out of my office and, skip this meeting and go supervise her. She's got that much more steadily now. And then public work equipment upgrades. We bought the new truck last year. That was the new flatbed truck. That was great for them. That's been a huge help this year through the hurricane and all of that in particular. So those are some of the highlights of what we really set as priorities last year that we have hit. There's plenty more that are yet to be addressed. And we'll be talking about those tonight more. GMS and Paul here has put together a budget for us. It's a starting point as we look at the commission priorities tonight. We currently have, I believe, $455,000 of that budget unassigned. So we can start from there. Paul, would you like to walk us through it?
Not really sure of your normal procedures for a workshop. Just the big picture with your budget. I would like to compliment last year's budget. It had a very accurate allocations. I was quite surprised, frankly, as we went through the audits and as we put this together. There were very small, if any, variances. So that's a good sign. So you have a really tight understanding of your expenses, and that is a good thing. The 2019 proposed budget, the basic assumptions included the costs that we knew about for the collective bargaining agreement with the police. The staffing levels we allocated a 3% cost of living on the salary lines. Those don't all show up. There's a reason for that. The calculations, as we got through them, there was some slight over budgeting in the salary lines for particularly Public Works and one other department, and so that it doesn't show the full 3%, but it's the right number. We had the only large variance in the entire budget that was corrected since the last one. I think it was emailed last Friday for you all, or last week. The one before you, there was an insurance adjustment. Basically, the way the insurance bill was being divvied up throughout the departments, we scrubbed that this morning and got it accurate, so it went up a little bit. You can see originally we were budgeting, I mean, I can give you the line item, but it was, historically you were budgeting about $116,000, and the real bill was $132,000. So I wanted to make sure we were capturing it correctly, and we are now. So that was the real small adjustment. So all those things said, there was one vehicle that we showed as a lease that would expire this year. We had it in the 2019 year, so that would be a deletion. Those types of cleanups were done since the last draft. Big picture is this keeps, what I always say is this maintains your current level of service and with known adjustments as stated. Other operations that you're going to direct in the coming weeks, we'll be happy to give you drafts that reflect those decisions.
And there was a total, what was the 400 and?
I would, yeah, today's draft, it dropped down to about 400,000.
I think it was 401,000 on today's draft.
So
I just saw
that's a good walking around number for in terms of building your reserves. That's not a bad cash pot to have as an unbudgeted line necessarily. Obviously, some of it's going to change, but you want to think in terms of percentages of health when you look at budgeting. Also, your 50% reliance on on ad valorem is very typical. That's a fluctuating revenue line that has the greatest variance. Obviously, we've enjoyed 4 straight years of 9 to 10% growth. But those are not things to put too many fixed expenses against, because if you have a fluctuating recurring revenue, then the fixed expense doesn't fluctuate. That's a risk. Those are the big picture types of things. I think you're tracking nicely in those respects. You have virtually zero debt by my standards, by most municipal standards. That's something you have to discuss and decide on as the months go by for your needs. But as a budget analyst, it's a very good budget. It's very tight.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Just would like to open to the floor on the commission to decide how you would like to go about looking at priorities. I know the manager reviewed last year's, I like to call it the Dot Fest, where we went through all the priorities that we had last year. I don't know if you would like to do it by department or look at the greatest priorities, capital budget projects. I know we've been talking about roads. It was terribly unfortunate that we had $913,000. And there is one point I wanted to clarify for some of the comments that went up. Yes, you can spend the CITT funds, but in order to get funds, you have to have some percentage of matching funds. So the decision, I think one of the challenges was, in order to get or make an ask of a $1.2 million ask for the roads, was you had to have some matching CITT funds or you would get nothing. So that was part of the challenge, was to do that. We did get a lot of help from Dave Caserta, getting it all the way through the governor's office, but they cut the entire budget for the entire department, which isn't very normal. Usually when it gets to the governor's line, at that point, it's usually signed. But having said that, it's spilt milk at this point. We don't have the money for roads, and I know that's still a major priority here. We will try again next year as well. But I did want to clarify that, because the idea that we were sitting on money to sit on money, I just wanted to be clear on that. The cost of redoing all the roads, just so everybody know, the estimates that have come forward with some of the folks, we didn't get a formal estimate, we got informal estimates at about $1.6 million to do all of the roads. I just want to is that about right? Or am I probably underdoing? That's just to resurface, that's not to, go ahead, Paul, go ahead.
Well, I mean, I don't know how many, what your linear road system is, but you can look at those contracts that other municipalities have bid, and you see their unit pricing, and it'd be an easy calculation for you, but that wouldn't be surprising.
Also, I did want to ask you just a clarification for the public. We talked a lot about capital improvement projects, as they are very costly, and how they're normally handled. Would you care to address that a little bit? Because the idea somehow that
Right.
that taking out another loan, I know, is a very sensitive issue in bonds
Right.
for cities, but if you would care to.
More than half of the municipalities in Dade County use a capital improvement program through a bond issue, a general obligation bond. That's the nature of a capped millage rate, and those are done by referendum, as you're probably aware, and they are an additional millage tied to a specific capital improvement project. And that's really about the only, that's the least expensive, most valuable way to get funds as a municipality. Others are less flexible and less, you have nothing to pledge to them in other than general revenue. So the general obligation bond for a road project or many projects would make more sense, would be one of your best vehicles, not speaking, beyond just the financing standards. Your other ones with matching and such and grants, those are the viable avenues for you. But that's really the only one you have.
Thank you. With that, I just want to make sure I clarify that point. Would you all like to go through it one person at a time? Would you like to do it categorically? How would you like to handle this? There are many ways we can handle it.
I think I've got one thing, and I think maybe I'm wrong. Everybody's thinking about the same thing. I think we all want to get something done as far as roads are concerned.
So do we want to look at then, since it was brought up anyway in the public, would you like to work by department or by priorities or start either way? It doesn't matter, just how would you like to start it?
Let's go by different projects that we've worked with. Is that all right with you? I don't know.
No, I'm confused because I didn't think that this was necessarily a budget workshop. I thought this was for the commission to prioritize measure to incorporate into the budget.
Right, so
Yes.
I'm asking, do you want, that's correct, so how would you like to handle that is what I'm asking. There's many different ways to handle that. And I don't want to be the one making that decision here.
Well, are we still going to have budget workshops? We
Yes.
usually have two of them, where we actually look at the different departments. So
Yes.
I thought the purpose of this meeting was something different than that.
Please, how would you suggest we handle the meeting?
We can, look at the dots that we did last year and see what priorities haven't been accomplished and reconfigure those if you want. Or we can start fresh, now having, another year of experience and understanding how things work and some changes that have happened since the last time we did this. I don't know, either way is fine with me, but I thought the goal is really more to look at the goals and not at departments and line items. I mean, it's great that we have the budget because that gives us an idea of how much we can expend. I do have a couple of questions on it though, because the way the budget is set up, the new budget, it's basically a mirror of the old budget. So the projects that we had put in there to get done, that didn't get done, are still being rolled over to the new budget. And some of those may be, like the sign installation, the 4 entrance signs, that's now incorporated in the new budget.
Right, which we can,
On top of that, we have the 400 to
Right.
allocate for commission priorities. And frankly, those things that are now being rolled over, they were our priorities last year. So we couldn't get to them. The money's still there. We should get to them. And I agree that we should use a PW director to help us, achieve these things. Because if not, we're just spinning our wheels and we're putting the money in the budget and we're not getting the project done. Because there are too many things for one person to take care of.
I agree with you. I think the only suggestion I would have, because of the upcoming issue with the unknown factor of almost a $300,000, I think is the estimate we've been given
I
for
think it's 200,000.
potential. Is that too high?
That's way too high.
Yeah.
What is the value that with the property value ad valorem we might lose?
Your increase is, I'm using a $190,000 calculation. That's 95% of what the assessed value with our millage would produce. So I'm using a conservative number for obvious reasons. But the new revenue for 2019 is projected a little over 200,000, but I'm recommending 190,000 be yours.
Because of
Right.
all right, so about 100,000.
But that impact is not going to happen in the budget year
Correct.
that we're addressing now.
Yes.
So, I mean, we can't keep putting things off on the possibility that we're going to be adversely affected because, as we saw, our ad valorem went up 10%. So we could have covered that difference. We could cover that difference.
I'm not,
I think,
go ahead.
I think we're talking about two different things. I think you're talking about how much was increasing.
Yes, sir.
You're talking how much is increasing, you're talking about how much it's decreasing. Aren't you? Are you not talking about the new homestead
The
exemption?
question
think-
was the new homestead exemption, what's the impact going to be?
That's
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you asked what was
no, it's
the
asking for the
2019
impact.
growth.
The impact is
Yeah,
usually,
so
is about 100,000.
It's about 200,000
200,000?
to 250,000.
That's
It's
okay.
gonna be, if we think it's gonna go by $25,000 more of that's gonna come off your assessed value, where approximately 10 mills, it's $250 per home. We have 1,100 homes, right? So it's 1,100 times $250. That's pretty close to what it should be. So I agree, we can't keep on, I agree with Roxy, can't keep on putting things off. And I think we should, let's take one item at a time, not look at the budget. Let's see things that we actually would like to accomplish. And say, hey, let's pick 4 items. Let's do 4 or 5 things and say, let's start on these right now. Let's get it done. Let's not keep on putting them off. And I think roads are probably, let's do one road, one street.
Okay, but we can use CITT money for the roads. That doesn't impact on our budget. So
That was my next thing. You're right.
it could be another project that PW person
Right.
can handle for us. That would be great.
How much do we actually have in CIT funds now?
I don't have your financials.
Okay, but I think it was like $400,000.
It's about
wasn't
400.
it?
I believe so. That's on the transportation portion, or I think it's 300 and something thousand on the transportation portion, and then
Another 100 something.
another 200,000 on the transit, if I recall
Transit. So we
correctly.
have $300,000 plus, I think, am I incorrect in saying we've got, is that plus the $77,000 that we did not spend last year and the $78,000 that we have to promote?
Now, part of what we've been doing the due-tos, due-froms, I believe, and please correct me about this, Paul, that over the years have not been done, where our traffic lights, or not our traffic lights, our street lights and so forth should have been taken out of CITT and haven't been. So we're catching all of that up as we go through the audits as well. So that is, I mean, I don't know that we necessarily had 77,000 last year that was untouched. I don't know. I think the FPL bills for the street lights should have come out of that. So I'm not sure what the remainder is off the top of my head.
So still, CITT money doesn't impact on the budget we set with the millage. We can have that conversation separately. We look for priorities, we should look for priorities now that'll impact on the budget that we're going to get from our millage set.
I have a question just to the manager, because you're ultimately the one who has to do the work. One of the suggestions that a colleague of mine had said, which I concurred with, was the idea is if we can't, I don't object to having a public works manager, that would be great. But if we can or cannot afford somebody full-time, like we did with GMS, where we got 4 experts for the price of 1, could we not, because public works is not one thing. Public works is many things. It's medians and a lot of vegetation, but it's also facilities. And one of the things that other cities have done quite successfully is they've used companies and given percentages for the completion of that task. And I think I've talked to Paul about this. The idea is we could get the experts in the field we need for what we do and pay them like you would pay a GC. So instead of having a dedicated person who has to be an expert in several areas, you have separate people and you're paying them to get the task done. And that may be a way so that we're not putting on more salary burden in FRS. I'm just suggesting that we might get the same outcome.
I think it's something we can explore.
Because I know it's worked, and I want to be clear, because I know I've talked to Dan Keyes for quite a bit of time about this, and Barbara Kuhl about this, and Bob Anderson about this. I think we definitely need somebody in charge of doing that. The question is how to go best about that. And that's just my thoughts on it. Because I know we had a public works manager before.
We have, absolutely.
I think from a commission point of view is how it gets done is something else. And that's how it gets done. We need to set priorities. What things would we like to get done, whether it gets paid through our regular budget or CITT funds? What do we want to get done?
Okay.
And then we can figure out how it needs to get done, how we actually physically get it done. But as long as we set that as a priority, it doesn't make a difference where the money's coming from.
Or how.
We need to get it done, and I think roads are one of it. I don't think we can do the entire village, but I honestly don't know. Let's do some roads. Let's see how it works, and then at least after we do some, now we have some sort of an idea what it actually costs us. Bring somebody in and say, hey, take a look around. These are the 3 roads we think needs to be done. What will it cost us to get it done? And it comes from CITT, it comes out of our budget, the money's there, it's going to get paid for. But that's a priority. Same thing with the medians. Let's pick out one median. Let's use that as an example. Fix it up the way it should be so everybody says, hey, that's really nice. We'd love to see all of our medians like that.
We did that on 114th
We
this
have
year.
an example
so,
already
yeah.
there.
Yeah.
Just to allow a little bit more cross-conversation, I'd like to go ahead and Commissioner Johnson sit down.
Just addressing the medians as well, and I think I've had this conversation a few times with our manager and haven't had a chance to have it with the commission. When I drive around and I see the medians, and some medians that look completely, let's say, disheveled, or there's a hodgepodge of vegetation, I understand that we have boards that can come to us with plans and how the median should look. I love what's here on 114th. But as far as, and I've heard a lot of residents in public comments tonight saying maintenance and maintaining how we look, and there's a lot of times where I look at medians and I don't feel like they're being maintained or cleaned up. And if that's something that we can do in-house to help clean up our medians so that when we're moving forward with a project, we have a clear picture. But even if we're not at the stage where we can strike the iron with filling up the medians, I think that we could do something with maintaining and cleaning what we have appearance-wise, and I don't see where that really gets done.
I disagree with you on that. On some medians get more attention than others. 114th has certainly taken a lot of attention this year because it took the brunt of the hurricane as well. But there's work to be done on medians. I know the median on 119th between 5th and 6th, for example. There's an area there that I've asked Public Works to go in and put in the poles so that it's no longer used as an area for residents to drive through the median because they've killed a portion of it. You can see the tracks and so forth. And there's more of those in the village that need to be taken care of like that. So that's really a starting point. All of our medians took a hit this year. We lost a lot of trees. There's a lot of medians that we've had residents go out and pretty much plant whatever they wanted in there as well. So we don't have a consistency there. We do need to trim the trees. That's something that we're going to budget for next year and put out an RFP or either piggyback.
We have budgeted for that this year, I believe, 15,000, if I'm not mistaken.
I think you're right. And we've probably, and I don't know the exact number. Caesar, do you know what we've spent on that off the top of your head? No? I'll have to look and see.
But yeah, because I know the canopy is definitely coming down.
It is. It's
It
getting
needs to be
lower.
lifted.
It's definitely time to raise the canopy again.
So just to move forward with just to make sure we get something done, because I want to make sure we're getting this done this evening. Do we all agree that, one, roads are a priority for repaving? And I do want to address one thing on the roads, just to make sure we're clear. The reason the roads are crumbling has to do with moisture underneath, as well as the amount of heavy trucks that are also driving over them. We have, I know the police, I talked to the chief and I talked to you about making sure we have no-through trucks, because we are getting a lot more because of construction and building, and that is creating some of the edge failure that you're referring to. That's a definite problem. One of the things that you'll see me bring up has to do with the weight of trucks. We shouldn't be having 10,000-yard concrete trucks running through here. Should be no more than 5,000-yard concrete trucks. So we have some also issues of what we have to do to, once we do pave them, to make sure we maintain them. But the repaving has to happen. There's a difference between resurface and then grinding up the bottom, raising the bottom a bit so that it stays drier, and then putting pavement over. Those are very different cost values. Just for clarification, the 1.6 was merely for resurfacing and not for doing the base over again. Just want to clarify. Having said that, my apologies for digressing a little bit here. So do we all agree that roads are a priority? And that we should move forward with something, since we did not get forward with the grant?
Yeah, I mean, the key things I think we need to be focusing on is, infrastructure. Roads is one of the things. Before I came here, I was thinking about the different things that I'd like to see done in the park if I had a magic wand. Roads and the medians, whether beautification and protecting the medians to keep vehicles from crossing over or parking in the medians. But everything seems to hinge on having somebody as a project manager, as a public works director, somebody who can actually oversee the projects, who can have a punch list, who, it's measurable, and we can actually get, or the manager can get the progress reports about this is what's being done, this is where we're at, and he can be accountable to the village manager. I've talked to the village manager on I don't know how many occasions about it. I think a lot of things are falling through the cracks, not because there's no desire to get the work done, but there's just too many balls in the air for one person to be managing. And I've already told him, for me this year, I want to know what do we need, because we have things budgeted to do some road improvements or to do some median repairs. what do we need financially, what do we need in the budget in order to bring that person on. To me, that's extremely important, because if we don't have that person there, then now we're still using a manager who's being pulled from different directions, and then the focus isn't being placed on, for example, we're going to do phase 1 of median repairs in this area. There's no one who's actually managing that project. So roads are extremely important. Medians are extremely, important. I mean, it all comes down to, infrastructure, because as the infrastructure continues to deteriorate, it puts a blemish on the park, and it makes it even more difficult for us, as an administration, to go after a resident and say, hey, you need to do this when,
Agreed. Agreed.
And I would add on to that list, because mine, right here, it's roads and medians, and I would add also the issue with code. Again, I've discussed this with the manager, and I've even said, I'll volunteer my time. I do think that the residents need to be educated. I've suggested that we do, but besides mailings, door hangers, I'll go around and hang them as to what are those top issues in code. If we're constantly putting that in front of residents, what the code issues are, I mean, in a way that helps the code officers. It puts a obligation on the residents. It puts the onus on the residents. And so that there's no question of, well, we didn't know or we don't understand. Yes, you're going to have people that are going to ignore, but I have reiterated in private meetings that my only concern is that people follow the code. Whatever it is, whatever the code is, it should be enforced. And I hear everyone's frustration, and I think right now we need to find a way to deal with this, to make this a bit better. I know that things are happening. My comment right now is not saying that things aren't going on, but I think it can be better, and it could be clearer for everyone, and that's the point I want to get to.
Thank you.
In your experience, having been before and now, in terms of the number of enforcement, do you see it having increased or decreased? Because there's a perception that it's not there. And I've personally been at the village and quite a bit, and I see stacks and stacks, and you're doing reports. So I'm not under the same impression that some of the residents are. What I am under the impression is where we have most of our issues seems to be with a lot of the rental properties. Not all of them, but a lot of them, and I'm not sure that is correct. Am I wrong?
That's certainly the rental properties have some, but a lot of it are private homes as well.
Okay.
Having been on code enforcement, we never seem to get enough. What my thought had been in the past was, years ago, we actually put out a one-leaf flyer that said the way your house looks, the way it should look. And at that time, I think we actually had our Public Works people put it out when they did the garbage. And I think that's actually what we need to do. We need to put some money aside and say, great, guys, this is the way your roof is supposed to look. This is the way some of them look. You have 3 months. In 3 months' time, we're going to do a sweep of the village, and we're going to take a look at everybody's roof. And if we have to bring in some other code people on their day off from some other municipalities, because a good roof should be a comparatively easy thing to take a look at and decide. And do the whole village all at once.
That's probably the least concern anybody has.
What?
Probably the biggest waste of time.
Okay, just to be clear, since you are definitely experienced in the chair of the board, I have no problem with opening the conversation up for issues of what the priorities are. I think the bottom line is we need the priorities listed as to what we're going to go after. I think health and safety is number one, but I do think aesthetics, whatever, and there's very varying opinions on what aesthetics are. Is it roofs? Is it awnings? Is it paint? Is it overgrown lawns? Is it, there's a ton of things that the officers go out. Is it carb light? Is it, there's different things, old cars sitting there. I think at the end of the day, for me, property maintenance and making sure we're enforcing it as much as you can, but there's also a misconception on the public, and I am going to stand up a little bit here, that even though you write a violation or even if you put a notice of violation, it is up to the owner to comply, and if it's a homesteaded property, like it or not, the difficulty is they may not. That doesn't mean you shouldn't fine them or lien them and all the other things. I think one of the things the officers have been trying to do, if I'm not mistaken, because I've talked to them a tremendous amount. Like I would write down addresses, and I'll go and I'll say, did you see this, this, and this? And I walked around, they said, yeah, we gave violation for this, we gave notice of this, we gave fines for that. Some of it comes down to collecting the fines, making sure the notice of violations go to the code board. I think that's what you were talking about fixing.
And that's the back end that we've been working on this year, and that's getting better. So.
Okay, I think so. We're in agreement. Roads, median, stronger code enforcement. Are we in agreement with that? Yes. Commissioner Ross.
Yeah, just to move some pieces along, I think every suggestion made by the Park and Parkways Board should be a priority for this commission. And it includes some of the ones that you're saying. We've already talked about a PW manager, the removal of trees. So, the items that Mr. Keys listed for us. The 4 signs, they're already in the budget, but how about the tree planting and a phased approach to removing the diseased and Australian pines? We need to set up those funds so that we can at least start. We're not going to do it all at one time. But we also, of utmost importance, is to have that PW director, and we actually had budgeted $30,000 for an administrative assistant who was never hired. The money's there in the budget. I guess you just didn't have enough time to do a search and hire somebody.
Yeah.
But if we don't put these people in place, then we're going to be back here, maybe not me, but someone will be back here next year saying, oh, well, we didn't do all those projects we set aside money for because we just had too many things going on. But we need to put the people in place to help get those things done.
And I agree wholeheartedly. And the reality is, this year, I have been firefighting since the day I took this job, cleaning up the messes that have been created over the last 10 years. And so
We
that's...
just need to talk about going forward. What
Agreed.
are we going to do to
Agreed.
get things done? And so that we're not in the same place again and again and again.
Okay, so what I wanted to I personally would like to see more than just tree plantings. I really like what was done on 114th. They did an outstanding job, the board. I would like to see more of those plantings done in different parkway medians. Please.
So would we. However, we can't do the basics. We're crawling backwards in maintaining our community. Okay? I mean, we have pointed out things and understand that there's a lot of frustration coming out of me right now, because this is many years, not 3 weeks. Not because there was a hurricane, but we can't get simple things done. And we as a board have somewhat of an issue of being given direction to design some landscaping for the medians and improve them. When we make a request, which we think will make a 5-10% improvement in the aesthetics of the medians, to have them edged with an edger each cycle. Okay? 4 months ago. 4 months ago, for somebody to pull out an edger and edge the medians. All right? I mean, if you want to see what I'm talking about and how that improves the aesthetic of a situation, 117th Street in front of Doc Morris's house, for 40 years he's been having his guy edge the median. Nice, straight, beautiful line. Get to the end of his property, it goes out like this. 4 months ago. And I've been told that, yeah, I'm going to tell them to do it. They're doing it. Oh, they're only doing it on a certain street, and they're not doing that. I mean, this goes to the problem of that's not something that a manager should have to directly address, except with the boss of the people who are supposed to be doing that, okay? That is not something that the hurricane affected. 4 months, it
No,
doesn't
I
take
get-
4 months, because
Yeah.
in 4 months, that's 8 times they've been through that same location and didn't do something that could improve the thing. We haven't been told that's a bad idea, we don't want to do that, okay? Time is, that's not an issue, it's just not an issue. I know enough about landscape maintenance, I did it for 30 years. You can pull out an edge or an edge the edge of a roadway quickly, and I'm belaboring this point as an example of the type of things that isn't getting done, okay? For whatever reason, it goes as a suggestion, it's acknowledged that that's a good idea and we'll get that done, and for some reason it doesn't get done. And the reasons coming back are unacceptable to me, okay, and the other people on the board. We would love to see more beautiful medians like this, okay, except there are issues associated with all our medians that you should evaluate first before you go throwing plants in. Certainly, we shouldn't be spending 1 minute putting a post in the ground to stop somebody going across the median. Not a minute, okay? We have a police department. Figure out how to get them to stop people from doing it, okay? That's all I'm going to say. I don't want to hear all the excuses that have been there before. There's a way that you can encourage people not to do things that are destructive to our community, okay? Use whatever resources you have in the community to do it. But roads, okay? All sorts of investigation needs to be done in order to get our roads done. What's the interaction with the North Miami Water and their circumstances? Are there any other underground facilities that need to be upgraded before we do some major work? At least you have to go through that process of finding out when they're planning this, when is it likely, who would do the repaving if they come through and rip up our roads, that sort of thing. So those are evaluative processes. Medians, we need to evaluate irrigation. What type do you put in? Can you afford to manage it? Okay, both in keeping it running, using the water, the electricity, if it's a pump system. What will the effect of those installations have on the existing infrastructure, i.e. trees that are in the medians? So there's a lot of things associated with it. Takes time. Those are major projects, okay? And they take somebody that works for the village to do that because they understand the culture of the budget and all of the interactions and the realities of functioning here. So
Thank you,
we
Dan.
think you need a public works director. Hire one. She's absolutely correct that we don't do what we need to do to stop the reason we're not getting anything done. Hire a $30,000 administrative assistant, that will alleviate some of his time, and maybe he can make sure that somebody's edging the sides of the medians over there.
Thank you, Dan. Okay, so I think we're all in concurrence, median beautification, roads, codes. Are there any other priorities that we talked about from last year that didn't get done that we wanted on our list?
Wait,
Dan, thank you.
I hear those. Thank you, Mayor, for the opportunity to speak. The thrust of that conversation was, number one priority, hire a public works manager, because that will help you get all those other things, tasks that person will do done.
We heard you, Dan. That wasn't not heard.
Yeah, and I think that's actually what I think most of the commission is in agreement with, is that I hope that we need to have a public works director, somebody there who can actually, because the problem is you got to have somebody to oversee these projects. You got to have somebody who's going to do the calculation, talk to the different municipalities, determine, like if we talk about, excuse me, I got a little bit of a sore throat. If we're going to be talking about, okay, we want to do road improvements, well, we got to have somebody who's actually going to manage that project, get the cost to us so that we can make a determination if we're going to do it all at once, if we're going to do it at phases. So I think that's pretty much an agreement. I think for a lot of the commission here, I would hope, is that we have to get a public works director to come in and somebody who can actually manage these projects, and that way it allows the village manager to provide oversight of that department, of that individual, and that person oversees his department. I mean, I think that's what we really need.
and I'm in agreement, because if we start to parse out and contract out, sub this and sub that, those are just, we're creating additional items for the manager to have to manage.
Yeah.
I was going to ask the manager, what do you think about this, and what do you want to do?
No, I mean, you guys, I have no my only objection to hiring anyone has been the impending homestead cut that I know we're going to face. And I really don't want to hire someone for a year and then have to let them go. But looking at how much our revenue has increased this year, presuming that it's going to increase probably similarly next year, I think we can afford it. And so I can look at hiring someone. So.
Well, one thing is you're going to be able to maintain and afford that position by bringing that person on, and once they start to beautify the medians, protecting the medians, and you start seeing road improvements, that does a lot to help with improving the property values. That also helps people who may drive into the park and drive to their home and look around and say, well, why should I really, give a care? I had to censor myself a little bit, but, why should I care about, cleaning my roof or cleaning my awnings or maintaining my front yard? Why should I worry about that? Look at my median. Look at the roads I drive in on. You start to improve that, and all of a sudden, you'll start to see people taking more pride, and then with more proactive code enforcement along with that, then you're going to see those values start to rise even more. And what's going to happen is, yeah, we're going to take a hit from the homestead possibly, but the property values are going to increase, and it's going to help offset that. So we'll be able to maintain that position. And I think at this point, it's, listening to residents riding around the park. I mean, the median right there in front of my house is a disaster. So I mean, I see it every day.
I don't disagree with what you're saying at all.
And something has to get done. And unfortunately, prior year we determined, oh well, we're going to put money towards this project, that project, but then there's no one who's actually able to that be their focus.
Okay.
And I think it's unfair to say, okay, village manager, you got to deal with the audits, you got to deal with the hurricane stuff, you have to deal with this, and by the way, I need you to manage these projects. And I think that's maybe what we, were thinking would work, and obviously it's not. So I think we have to give the administration
I was just
whatever
concerned about,
support.
my only concern was whether or not we could afford it with the homestead. If you're saying we can, I have no problem with having a public works director.
And I haven't talked this over really well with GMS and so forth, but I think we can, and I'll look into it a little further. And absolutely.
And I believe that, say, 25% of one of the goals of stuff that we're doing is roadway. That does come out of CIT funds.
Move on. I don't know if we actually got the consensus to.
Do we have a
put in
consensus?
EMP's suggestions.
I think most of the suggestions they had, I think the only issue I had to do with how amounts of money, so I'm not willing to commit the funding till we look at what we have. But I have no problem with some of the overall suggestions that were made.
I don't think we're looking at money. We're looking at what are our goals, what things would we like to get done.
That's fine, I'm just saying, yeah.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with what.
As far as their list that they provided us, I'm in agreement with everything that needs to get done.
Great.
Great. So we'll move on to another topic? Okay. The recreation center. We had budgeted for lights that we never put in. Since 2015, we had funds that the foundation gave us that we were going to match to put in lights. Can we make that a priority since the money is there? And I think it must be in the budget if it's just a rollover from last year's budget.
I would think so, yeah. I mean, it wasn't that expensive anyway, and that was just to light the front of the entryway to the building, if I recall correctly.
Right.
So that we can certainly
We had
do.
also talked about doing some internal renovations on the inside, flooring and painting and things like that. Can we make that a priority? Because that floor is that's just really...
I know, and the first thing I want to do is get the exterior done, because we know that all the eaves, there's a lot of rotten wood there. We don't know what we're going to find underneath that wood, and so I would like to hold some money out until we get, to get that completed and done, so the building structurally...
And we also have to make sure this time they put vents in, because the reason it rotted in the first
that's on
place
the
is
west
they
side.
didn't put any vents in when they redid the roof.
So this November it's it's not the presidential, but it's a big election. We're going to have a lot of people coming to the village to vote because this is a precinct not just for village
Right.
people, for outsiders. We'd like to present ourselves as a place where people want to bring their children to play.
Absolutely.
And for that to be like exciting for them to see.
Mhm.
Can we get that done before November?
We're working on that. And so I've asked Issa to get me all of the estimates for interior painting, for exterior repair and painting. Parks and Parkway have looked at the landscaping to start replacing some of the landscaping in the front. The lighting, Commissioner Ross, you just brought that up. I'll be happy to get that done. And so, I
And
mean,
if we have any money left over, can we look at some sort of updating the rec center, whether it's, I just got back from a trip, and it had these, and I'll send pictures to all of you. It had, and that would, we could probably use CITT transportation funds for this. It had big over, like a nice awning where people could sit and be shady, but on top of that, it had places that had bike equipment so people could repair their bikes. It was used as a transportation piece. So it's on there, it's on the Legacy Trail, and I can share photos with you. But it had some very, very interesting communal shading spots along with roadways, and we could possibly look at that as well as putting it throughout the park, because we use our roads for not just cars. One of the things I'd like to see is our roads being marked for pedestrian and bikers, so that, therefore, when people come through the road, there are laws that protect both pedestrians and the bikers, which we don't have now. So we could possibly look at doing something like that, where there's different spots where there'd be shading, shade and other seating structures, and we could get that out of
are
CITT.
you just speaking along the medians?
Yeah, along the larger sections where people would go, so that they'd be sparsed around maybe the median parkways. And it could be done very aesthetically. It was done very well. There's a variety of ways that can happen. The Parks and Parkway Board could look at that. But I'd like to see it so that we make this a pedestrian and bike-friendly community, and use that as a transportation thoroughfare so that we are protecting the pedestrians. One of the greatest complaints I get is from people who are walking, biking, strollers with babies, getting run off the road. Once we do our roads, we can designate them as both shared parkway, shared space. And if we do that, we will now, it'll give the police a lot of enforcement. It'll help a lot with, we can reduce, I think Commissioner Bill talked about reducing the speed limit to do that. I'd like to see these things done so that there's a much greater understanding that this is a shared roadway. This is not for cut-through traffic. I've spoken to the chief about signs saying no cut-through trucks. I'm hoping the commission will agree with me on this. We should not be having cut-through trucks coming through the park because Waze took them that way, or Google's took them that way. And if that's put on the entryway in, we can stop some of this cut-through that we're having now. I mean, the number of stories I hear of people having to jump out of the roadways because some truck's flying through, not just a car, but a transportation truck. Proving if they're cut-through or not, that's a little more complicated for the police. They have to actually transport them going through and not stopping. But I'd like to see those sorts of things as we go through our roadways and address them. So there were kind of three things I mentioned. To be clear, one is marking the roadways now for pedestrian and bicycles, which they've done in many communities throughout. Lauderhill has them. Several communities have them. The second piece was some sort of structures that are shade and seated structures for our parkway medians that are kind of considered transportation, like the Legacy Trail. So they have different things in them. They could have bike repair stuff on them, and I can show you pictures of that. Those were the two main things I was talking about.
It seems, memory serves me, we used to have no-through truck signs.
We did.
Years ago, and I don't know if they were...
I don't know.
Had to take them down, or the laws changed, or...
We still do, and it's put up by the county. There are a couple places where they're missing, but it did say no through trucks. I'm not quite sure whether or not that's enforceable.
Right.
Or what needs to be done with them.
Chief, would you be so kind, because I'd like to ask you a few questions if I may, because I know we've had discussions on this. The discussions were no through trucks. The discussions were how to get people off our medians and median parkways and be able to make sure we don't have that. So I'm going to put him on the spot.
Good evening, everybody. Chief Louis Cabrera. I've had several discussions about the medium parking situation. I've taken the opportunity to drive around and identify what the numerous issues are. So basically, one of the main issues that we have with the medium parking is that the current signage that we have here basically says something similar to keep off grass or something to the effect of no stopping on the grass. It's not very clear on the law, which is no parking, and it's supposed to cite the
Code.
the code. So one of the things that I've had a discussion with the manager about is, obviously, the village has a concern with sign pollution. So we don't want to go that route. So what we want to do is be able to be effective and efficient in the manner we're going to go about it. So I was telling the manager, we can identify the more critical areas where we have the most parking, take the signs that are currently there, and exchange them for signs that are specific to the law. And that allows my officers to be able to enforce the parking issues that we're currently having. The second thing that I discussed with the manager, and we discussed at the public safety meeting the other day, I made a couple of recommendations. I said, why don't we look at not only striping, but how we identify the markings on the road that are reflective, and kind of bring that to the attention of the drivers. In many places, they have signage that has the bicyclists drawn on the road, or some of them have the caution signs, and that alerts the driver, hey, I think I need to slow down in this area. So those were some of the recommendations. I have driven around and looked at, there's a couple of places with no-through trucks, but it's so scattered that you really can't, the message doesn't get across. So that's another thing that we would have to look at. And when we put the no-through signs, no trucks through the village, we need to put an ordinance or a statute that's applicable. So when the officers stop the individuals, we can go ahead and apply the proper citation. Besides all of this, I've had many discussions with the manager about this. Is the two biggest things that I've done an assessment that I've noticed in the village right now are when it comes to law enforcement is the property crimes, vehicles, items left unsecured, so on and so on. And the second, I think the biggest complaint that I get everywhere is with the traffic and speeding. So I had discussions with the manager, making sure that all my officers get radar certified so we can begin to address some of the speeding issues. And then we're floating an idea of looking at additional days for the motorcycle to patrol within the areas, and maybe looking at even adding an additional bike for the area in the future, to have 7 days a week motorcycle patrol out here. Many would question, well, why do we need 2 bikes? Is it another toy? My answer to that is absolutely not. If you take the mentality of an officer who's in a car to the way an officer on a bike thinks, his primary function is to address traffic issues and do traffic accidents. The officers in our car are more focused on looking at different activities, directed patrolling, and I think it'll be a tremendous asset to the village to have 7 days a week motorcycle coverage out here. I understand there's a lot of restraints, fiscally and financially, but I think if we're prudent, if we look at pricing, it's even it's cheaper than investing even in a car. I've also worked with a couple of municipalities, and we're looking at donation of cars for our reserve officers. I got a city that's committed to 3 additional cars, not too far from here, and that'll give us 3 more cars for our reserve officers to drive around. Mayor, I'm going to take 10 more seconds. May I?
Absolutely.
Tomorrow I'll be swearing in 2 more officers. One of them will be a full-time will be an officer designated for the park. This individual, almost his entire career, has worked with the kids and the police athletic programs, and I'm hoping that with this officer's help and an additional officer that I'm going to be assigning to the park, we can have police, youth, and community involvement within our village. So we're working towards getting to where we need to be, and taking corrective measures to make sure the things that were not done correctly don't ever happen again. If you have any questions.
Any questions, Chief?
Chief, have we found out how many signs we need and what the ordinance actually needs to say?
Yes, I had that discussion with the manager. We're looking at anywhere between 15 to 20 signs as a pilot program to begin to implement the signage through the mediums.
Okay, and the other thing is I think we need to know is, in fact, that's a Dade County ordinance. It's not a Village of Biscayne Park ordinance. They get a, what is it, it's a uniform traffic violation?
Uniform traffic citation.
They get a uniform traffic citation, it goes to the county, it's not us. So
Correct.
right now, if somebody doesn't live in the park and they park in the median, there's really nothing we can do about it.
Yes, and that's been, since day one I got here, that's been one of the discussions. Our officers, obviously, for good reason, want to make sure that they're doing everything they can within the law. And, they get called out there for these calls of parking in the medium, and there's nothing really that they're able to do to enforce the unlawful medium parking. Even though the signs is very clear, don't stop, don't stand, don't.
But, Chief, even though at the moment, but we do have our village ordinance that says no parking on the median.
Right, but that would be, if from my research, it's more of a code enforcement citation. It wouldn't be a police
Uniform.
officer citation.
Uniform
Right, but
citation.
we could in fact give them a code, as long as, see, the problem I would see is, if a code person goes out there, can they in fact take a look at the license plate and see whether or not it's a resident?
So that's a great question. If it's not a resident of the village, who are we really citing as
But what I'm saying,
within the
a
code?
code
Yeah.
enforcement officer doesn't have the ability to
Correct.
look up, but our police officers do.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And that's why that was one of many projects that I was been looking at to make sure that we implement immediately. This year, that's one of the goals that I've set out.
Obviously, you've been told that parking in the median is the only problem. There's quite a bit of problem with vehicles crossing on a regular basis, making journeys around the end of the block or turn around that way. And do you see a differentiation in that situation in terms of the laws that are there? Is driving more a different violation than static parking?
Yeah. That's another great question. Two things. I have two school of thoughts. Once we get the signs in, it'll put the officers in awareness about what's happening in the medians. Right now, they basically say, well, the medians are kind of off limit. There's nothing there. Second of all, there is a Florida state statute that prohibits anybody from driving across these mediums. So if myself or any officer observes any of these actions, we can lawfully cite the vehicle. We don't have to post it. Unlike the other one that you have to post.
So we've been dealing with this for 30 years, okay? So I'm glad that you're jumping on, as a citizen, I'm glad you're jumping on the right questions.
Yes.
But part of the effort, whether it's the police department or some other arm of the village, okay? I know Joe Smith, my neighbor, is driving across the median, okay?
Okay.
I don't live, I'm just making up.
Oh, okay, I was going to tell you,
I'm making up
let me know
stuff.
when he does that.
Okay, well, it's not a matter of, I've heard over the years, you have to see them do this violation.
Right.
Okay? Okay, but you know Joe Smith's doing it. Everybody knows Joe Smith's doing it, okay? So, some public relations effort, okay? Not just to single out Joe Smith, but to notify everybody on the street that some culprit is driving across the median by some little notice on the door or whatever. And, if you happen to see who it is, we'd like to go talk to them, and say, hey, don't drive across the median, it's vandalism.
Right.
And
it's dangerous.
and it's dangerous. Whatever, use a public relations effort to address the person who's doing it, and you don't ever have to accuse anybody of doing it. You just tell everybody that, hey, we're not gonna, don't do this, and if we see you doing it, somebody's gonna get a ticket, and, that's the kind of, and it got started under one city manager, 2 or 3 back. They made an effort to do the
Yeah,
We as citizens don't want that to be the solution. We
Right.
want,
So, I want to answer that question. So, we're not going to put any ugly poles because we don't need poles to enforce this law. So, right now, officers, and I've had this discussion with our officers. If they observe it, if they see it, they're going to take the appropriate action. Before we were talking about the median parking, and I wanted to make sure there's a distinction. So, when it comes to education and informing the public, one of the things we've done is we've created this village resource officer position, which is going to be working with the other groups that we have right now to do some public education, contact meetings, work with Crime Watch and create additional meetings, work with the citizens on patrol groups and inform the residents. In addition to that, if you go to the police website now, it's back on. We put out information, we put the stats, what's occurring in the community, what we're doing. So every week, we make sure we upload new information. So we're going to be doing that. And one of the commissioners brought up earlier the tags, the door
hangers.
The door hangers. We used to do that in community affairs back many years ago, and they were very effective. They're very positive to put out messages, and they're pretty inexpensive. So that's something that I had previously discussed with the manager for the police department, just to, when we need to send out a message, be aware. There's a predator out, or any information we want to put out immediately, especially in an immediate area. That is a strategy that we can go ahead and apply. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Can't do anything.
And I agree with you. There's nothing wrong with the officer contacting the individual and letting them know that they've received a complaint, and that the complaint stated basically, and the information that we're getting from what we're seeing, the physical evidence, is that there's been a violation of driving through the median, and we're asking professionally and courteously, please, if you happen to know who it was, or if it was yourself, please do not do this any longer. It's a violation of law. Yes, sir. Yeah, we could do that. There's no issue with us making contact with anybody and having a professional, courteous conversation.
Just one clarification point. I know we have a lot of construction going on too, and there's a lot of issues with medians directly from construction sites as well. I'm just going to share that with you because I personally have told people to move off medians and to stop crossing medians, so there's both those things. I do want to just move on. I'm going to ask for 2 more questions from the audience, and we're going to move on from this.
Mayor, can I just answer
yes.
one question? So about 3 weeks ago, I just want you to, if I say something, I follow up, I take action. About 3 or 4 weeks ago, we got a call. It was in front of a home of a government employee. I'll just leave it like that. And the complaint was basically there was a motorcycle in the middle of the street, and they were doing donuts, and they had taken off. So I think we were there within probably 15 seconds. We got there. There was nobody there. We followed up. I went myself. I went with Commander Nick and about 3 other officers. We were concerned about safety. So what we did is we knocked on every door in the neighborhood to find out who it was and to try to identify if we had cameras. So to answer your question, I am going to do everything within the law always to make sure that the police services we're providing to you are superior services and that you feel safe in this community. So I will take those additional steps as needed. Okay?
One more question, then I'm afraid. David Raymond.
The bunny is apparently munching somebody else's garden or something, so I understand there are other things to do. But can't they be directed to,
Well, to answer that question, our officers are directed to enforce any violations of law. So I will tell you personally that when they're out there, directed patrol, visibility patrolling, they're out there looking for traffic enforcement issues, and they're out there also, looking for any, preventing violations of criminal activity. So they're definitely not told, no, you're just gonna drive around and do nothing all day or just go to a call. They're well aware of what the residents expect, and they're out there doing their job.
real quick on the median issue, is it possible to, whether it's your department or code, to put, those big ugly stickers that they put on your
The
car
orange
if
ones,
you-
the orange.
if you're in a condo or something, the wrong place, can't they have something like that printed up that says, you're not allowed to drive through the, to park through, and it's not any kind of legal notice, more as a just stop doing this, it's, we're gonna dirty up your car.
We do have those. A matter of fact, if you walk into the police station right now, they're sitting on the first desk on the counter. The issue that I was concerned with those were the obstruction, where they put it and the obstruction, and then the issue of, does it go as far as maybe vandalizing someone's car if it sits in the heat for 6 hours? So you gotta take a look at it. Public safety, their safety, compared to sending a message. So I don't want the message to take somebody's life, because we either covered one of their windows and now this person unfortunately gets into an accident. But I will tell you that if we, when we get the signage up, we will be out there enforcing these illegal medium parking.
Thank you so much, Chief. Appreciate it. Might I suggest, instead of the late hour, that we continue trying to go through at least the general big topics and make sure we go from that, if I may.
One of the things that we've talked about before, and I didn't actually find it in the budget, I don't know that we set aside some money for it, but a parking surface at the recreation center. Everyone parks on the dirt, and we're telling people not to park on the dirt. I think that we should make that a priority for the village.
Okay, there was a couple things I just want to clarify and make sure we're on consensus. So to start with what you just said, do we all have agreement that we're going to move forward with the parking surface? I think we originally agreed to, help me out, Commissioner Ross, I forget what those the turf block type things. Do we all agree we should move forward with the turf block for the rec center?
Or we should move forward with some type of
With some
parking.
type,
Some sort
Yeah,
of
I don't
parking.
want to limit to turf block. There's
Whatever.
other things that are out there now.
Okay, so whatever, you all can look into that and let us know. Also, do we all agree that communication, putting some budget together in case we need to send out mailings or hangers or whatever, we have some sort of funding that helps us communicate better, especially with, I believe, this was a promise I made and did not follow up on, so I'll take the heat for that on key code violations and concerns that are resident, for the residents that are not occurring, whether it's bulk trash or other code issues. Do we agree with that? Okay. Yes? I believe there were several recommendations of the rec center that were made. Do we agree with all of those recommendations that were made for the rec center? Lighting, not the stuff that I mentioned, but the lighting, paving, the interior and exterior flooring and things like that. Do we all agree to move forward with that as priorities?
Yeah, I think that's
Yeah.
what we had that last year.
I just want to make sure we're all in
Yes.
agreement on that. Was there any consensus to look at, when we look at streets and roads, to look at marking the streets for pedestrian, like the chief had spoken about as well, and I spoke about earlier about pedestrian walk, pedestrian and bike pathways? So when we do repave, we put that markings on there so that we designate it as pedestrian and parkways.
Christian and I had spoken with Dorita, is that the woman's name? from-
Dorita.
Dorita.
With the county.
And that came up, and I was under the impression she was going to do that on some of our streets.
Well, and the county is supposed to actually come in
Yeah.
and be repainting the stop
Restriping?
bars and so forth.
Yeah.
And where are they? They were supposed to be here last week, were they not, Caesar? Did they start, or?
Just to confirm, the county and the manager have been speaking I believe Commissioner Belt as well, is that right?
Right.
So I'll let you take over on that. Go ahead, Commissioner Belt.
Yeah,
Okay. As far as the county with the striping, they were supposed to be here last week, but they had a little delay. They're aiming to try to be here this week. I have to confirm with them. As far as I know, 97 stop bars have been approved for the county to take care of. There's 97 stop bars throughout the whole village that has been accounted for. I'm just waiting for them to be here to actually start it.
Excellent. Thank you,
When
sir.
Christian and I went around with her, we pointed out some other things that we thought would need to be done. Actually, one of the things was on 11th Place, putting a stripe down the center of the street, which will make it look actually a little bit narrower on each side. So maybe that would slow people down.
On that curve,
Because their perception of the road being narrower may make them go slower. I don't know if it'll work or not, but if they're willing to do it, let them do it. So,
Is that something we can get the county to do, Caesar?
I could definitely ask them.
yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
ask.
yeah, put it in with what they're already doing for us.
Can you ask them about pedestrian marking, pedestrian shared roadways, and see what that involves as well?
Yeah, I'll include that with the email that I sent them this week to find out where they are with everything else.
Thank you. Commissioner Ross?
I had a question about the police and what's on the budget for police. It's because it's a rollover of last year's budget. We're not reflecting the restructure that you've gone through, the motorcycle that you're going to suggest. Are we going to get a new police budget?
Yes, we'll be getting all of these. What we were doing tonight was just setting the priorities, and then we'll
Right.
take into account the director's opinions on, or suggestions and recommendations on all the departments. So you'll be getting a new police budget as well.
So if it's not in the police budget and you seem to be really attuned to the needs and where we need to improve, I'd like to make sure that we have in the police budget or through FDLE training,
Correct.
training,
Yes.
you know, sensitivity training, all sorts of stuff, given the
Ethics, diversity.
things that we've been seeing in print.
Right.
We want to make sure that we are being proactive and preventing any further.
Chief, do you want to talk a little bit about also what you've been doing so that you can make people briefly aware? I know this is turning into a public safety session, but go ahead.
You know, we've been providing in-service training here to our officers. Last week, I have to, I'm going to bring this incident up. We have to commend our officers. We were dispatched to a call where there was an individual who asked for the police to kill him and said that he wanted suicide by cop, and our officers acted professionally. They did exactly what they're taught to do, which is allow time and distance to work in your favor. There's no reason to rush the situation. They kept a distance. The parents were able to calm and contain the situation, and then the officers were able to get the individual the assistance that's needed. Since then, the mom came and met with me personally. I probably met with her over 2 hours. I provided numerous recommendations, and also we discussed on how, the difficulties of those issues where someone wants law enforcement or anybody else to take their life. So that was a big concern, not only for law enforcement, but for the community that lives in that surrounding area. And I'm working together with the family to make sure that the individual gets the help they need, but also that it doesn't become an issue for the community. So these are, immediately after that, I put out a notice that any officers who have not attended that mandatory CIT training train. I've been in conversations with the Federal Bureau of Investigations in order to make sure that we have civil rights training with FDLE on diversity and ethics training. I know I brought this up and Commissioner Ross brought to my attention and to assist me that we have some agreements, but we're looking at different MOUs to assist us in different training areas and working with the Region 14, which is our training center for this area. Definitely employee development and training are critical in order for us to have a professional, ethical, and a department that we all can be proud of, and I'm definitely looking in that direction.
It's always been important to me to allow for that in the budget, not only in the police, but in all of the departments, because I think we can only function better if we educate our people and elevate them.
I totally agree, and that was, besides perception, I don't know if you noticed, they all wear one uniform now, and they're all clean shaven, besides perception, and the fact that I've been very clear, we're not going to tolerate anything but the very best for this community, so we're really working hard on turning that around.
Thank you very much, Chief.
Thank you, Chief.
So we've talked about the police and the police budget. Do we all agree to support all the objectives and actions that the chief is taking regarding education, regarding traffic culling,